Well, here's the latest phase in the bailout of the world's troubled finance system. Amid fears of a global property crash, the world's major central banks are buying bonds backed by home mortgages. The central banks are hoping it will free up frozen credit markets, but some fear it will only encourage more profligate lending and transfer risk to the taxpayer. To discuss this, I'm joined by economics correspondent Stephen Long. So, Stephen, hi. The RBA could now own my mortgage. What's a bond backed by home mortgages?
Well, this is the whole basis of modern financial markets, and it's buoyed the property markets for years, Virginia. We've had a process where around the world banks have bundled up home mortgages into bonds or securities, sold them off into a secondary market where people invest in them for a certain yield, and that is used as collateral to borrow more money, and on the process goes. The only trouble is with the global credit crunch, that whole market has dried up because there was a panic about the subprime mortgages collapsing. So now the central banks of the world have stepped in, including the Reserve Bank of Australia, and they're swapping these mortgage-backed securities for gilt-edged government bonds. And not just for a short period of time either. They announced a little while ago they were doing this, but now they're doing it for a year or more. And that raises all sorts of questions.
Are they generally a good investment for them?
Well, that's the $64 trillion question. They're not buying in, the central banks, as an investment. They're not doing it to make money for me or you or help the taxpayer. They're basically trying to bail out the banks and unfreeze the frozen credit markets by doing this. So they're swapping the debt in the bonds that people just don't want to buy because the market's frozen because of fear for good stuff, government bonds, to try to restore investor confidence and stop further banks getting into the trouble that Bear Stearns in the US and Northern Rock in the UK did. Now, the question is this a good thing? I mean...
Well, the question is should the central banks be involved? I mean, if the private market won't step in and buy these ones up, should the central banks be buying them?
Well, indeed. And that was a question that no one was asking a little while ago when they first announced it because everyone was so desperate for it to happen. But now people are asking that question. I mean, the dictum of this was announced a long time ago by a famous British financial author, Walter Bagehot, who said that you should lend at high rates of interest against good collateral. Well, the central banks aren't charging high rates of interest to do this sort of swap, and there's questions about the collateral. Now, the Reserve Bank says they're only buying prime mortgages rated AAA by the ratings agencies, and I think we're probably okay in Australia. In the US, the central bank is really buying any sort of rubbish because they're so desperate. But the question is, you look at the ratings agencies, well, what sort of ratings did they give on the stuff that turned toxic? They gave some of that AAA. So there are real question marks here about whether it's a good thing and also whether it will just encourage more of the same. More profligate lending, more problems in the long run.
It's a fascinating area we'll explore again, I'm sure. Thanks, Stephen.
You're welcome.